Okay, welcome everyone. Remember, as you are joining, go ahead and tell us the city and state that you're calling in from and the year that you first became a member of Seed Savers Exchange. Welcome Angela from Grand Rapids and Paul from Rockford, Illinois. Laura from Marion, Massachusetts. Henry from Irwin, Iowa. At Seed Savers Exchange, we had our first plant sale in person on site without reservations this year. That was so fun, and I got to greet people there, and it was great to hear where everyone was from. We had people coming from up to 6 hours away or more. So it was incredible, and it just shows how energetic our members are to come to the farm. And I encourage all of you, if you haven't visited Seed Savers Exchange, Seed Savers is open 7 days a week, and our visitor center is open from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Central Time. But our farm is open dawn to dusk, so you can come to the farm anytime and go for a hike or go fishing or enjoy our orchards and gardens. So it's 6:30, so I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome, my name is Cindy Goodner, and my role at Seed Savers Exchange is Development Director, and I'm going to be your host this evening. I want to remind you that this session is recorded, and we're recording so our members can view this after the event as well, especially people who registered but were unable to attend at the last minute for whatever reason. I'm going to go through a few housekeeping things before we get started. First, we encourage you to have your video on so we can see you and have a sense of togetherness. Please stay muted unless you are actually speaking. That way we avoid having background noise and feedback. And, you can toggle back and forth. If you want to see the speaker, you might be in primary speaker view. Otherwise, you can go to gallery view. I'm on a desktop computer, so the way that I do that is to click the grid of squares in the upper right-hand corner of my screen and select gallery, and then I can see everyone at once. On a phone, that's a little bit different. Just tap the screen and the icon should be at the bottom. So the meetup tonight, I'm going to introduce two people from our Farm and Field Ops team that are joining us today. We're going to hear from them about questions that were submitted from gardeners in our network. And then about midway through our meetup, we are going to be split up into breakout rooms where you will get to talk in a small group, gardener to gardener, and share a little bit about what you're doing and hear what others are doing too. And then we'll gather back together at the end. So first I would like to introduce, I'm going to introduce two staff members. And first I'm going to introduce Christy Nicky. Christy, can you give us a wave so everyone knows who you are? Christy is a fourth-generation family farmer from central Indiana with deep roots in the Moravian and Muncie, Delaware communities. She has worked in food systems for more than 20 years as a professional chef and through running market farms, working with food rescues, and managing CSAs. Christy has attended Clemson University with an animal science and pre-vet focus, recently graduated from MIU in Fairfield, Iowa with a Bachelor of Science degree in regenerative organic agriculture. And next I'm going to introduce Justin. Justin, give us a wave so we know who you are. Justin Scarin is originally from Western Illinois and started working at Seed Savers Exchange in 2020. A Fayette County Master Gardener through Iowa State Extension and Outreach, Justin's background has primarily been in the home and gardening realm prior to joining on the staff at Seed Savers Exchange. His at-home experience has focused on native plant landscaping, kitchen preservation gardening, and community gardening with a focus on food pantry production. His time at Seed Savers Exchange has been spent in field work, greenhouse work, seed processing, and packaging and distributing seeds from our seed house. So welcome, Christy and Justin. I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'm going to mute myself, and you can introduce yourselves and talk about and get us started through the question and answer.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Cindy. Yes, we're just going to talk a little bit about what we're doing so far this season at Seed Savers. We're growing out more than 700 varieties of plants that have all come out of the greenhouse and gone into the ground at this point. So it's been a really busy past 7 weeks of planting since kind of our last frost date here in Decorah, Iowa. So we've been really, really busy out all over the land. We have a little under 900 acres that we manage here at Heritage Farm. And we do that in a series of little small grows all over the land for isolation distances and for lot checks and different things that we're growing out for, also for our preservation department and for the exchange. So that's what we've been working on. It was really hot out in the field today. I'm still like in a little bit of a brain fog recovery mode. Anything you'd like to talk about, Justin, before we dive into some questions?
I don't have much to add. Just yeah, it's been a wild ride. We just transitioned, from planting to maintaining, and looking forward to when we transition from maintaining to harvesting. So that's about it.
Yeah, so fun. All right, great. So we have a big list of questions that you guys have submitted, and we're just going to kind of bounce back and forth with some of those. So Oh, Justin, do you want to start with the one on native plants?
Yeah, that'd be great. It's funny we got that one because just today I was actually gathering some native seed on campus. So I've been kind of gathering and getting into the native seed collection for a few years now, probably about 5. My biggest takeaway has been 2 resources I would recommend the most are Prairie Nursery and Prairie Moon Nursery. One's in Waukon, Iowa, and the other is in southeastern Minnesota in Monona, I believe it is. Both are excellent resources. They have full maps of the United States and will show you county to county whether or not a plant is native to your region or maybe nativized or in the state, might be close enough, depending on your purposes. But what I typically look for is watching the plant throughout the year and getting the idea of when the flowers are about to finish, because once they finish pollinating, what I like to do personally is use a bloom bag like we sell online. The bloom bags are typically for keeping pollinators out of a flower, but what I use them for is I put an entire spent flower head that's going to seed in a bloom bag and tie it off. Just today, I got golden Alexander's, foxglove beard tongue, and some star sedge from the woodland on campus. And basically, you just let the plant do its thing, and it will eventually drop off its seed in the bag, and you can come back and collect it. And so it's really just about watching and getting to know the plants. Those resources I mentioned, I think, are the best way. Getting to know the seasons you're looking for, when they're going to be in bloom. And the biggest resource that I've used of theirs is actually the germination of seed, because a lot of these native perennials are really tricky and they require what's called stratification, which is giving them a pretend winter in usually a moist environment that's kept cool, like a refrigerator, for a few months. I've had experience using moist paper towels and Ziploc bags for that. Prairie Moon uses sand, I think, for theirs, but yeah, it's a very deep dive. And there's way more than I could even get into, but it's really worthwhile. And I've definitely noticed the increase in native biodiversity in my own property doing so.
Thank you, Justin. That was incredible. Can you read the question that you just answered also, so we know what the question was?
Absolutely. Let me just, it was very specifically, are members of Seed Savers Exchange saving seeds from native plants in your area? So I guess that said, I don't know exactly in the exchange specifically how much detail there is in nativity of a plant, but you know, it's always open for us to put our own plants out there for others to share. So
Great. All right, we had a question from Amy Essick regarding what is a natural solution for pill bugs or roly-polies. She's having a problem in Central California. She tried some diatomaceous earth and it was not the solution that she hoped for. And my biggest solution for this is to understand kind of the nature of pill bugs, and they're what's referred to as a detrivore, which means that they're seeking out plant material that is already in distress or dying. It's sending off some sort of pheromones that are alerting them to its unwellness as a plant. So there's a number of different things you can do to kind of keep your plants from sending out those kind of pheromones and those signals that they're in an unhealthy state. One of those would be to make sure you don't have any decaying plant matter or plant matter that's getting in direct contact with the soil. Maybe do some light pruning if you have any damaged kind of flowers or leaves that are hanging around at the bottom of the plants, making sure you have good airflow going through there. And really just making sure you're encouraging healthy plant growth, making sure you have healthy plants and healthy soil. And that when you're transferring them out into the garden, you're making sure that they're getting, you know, if they need a little more nutrition, if they need regular watering, just really paying attention to the health of those plants. Because pill bugs or roly-polies are attracted to that like dead and dying or diseased plant matter. Diatomaceous earth can be a really good solution for a number of things, but I don't think those specifically. It's more often used for bugs that have kind of that hard outer shell or like true insects. So I hope that answered that question. Justin, do you want to talk about when and how to prune tomatoes next?
absolutely. That was submitted by our own Cindy Goodner. Thank you very much. So tomato pruning is again about, you know, monitoring and getting to know your plants. I think the first thing to know is whether or not your tomato is determinate or indeterminate, which those definitions tell you whether or not the plant will fruit throughout the season or fruit altogether at once. So a determinate plant will have a limited amount of growth. There's not a lot of pruning you will do with those, unless, like, we'll get into a question coming down the line about disease prevention. You might want to do some pruning there. But most of the tomatoes in our available to growers are indeterminate. And so they will continue to grow. They're the ones that you're worried about with all the suckering coming out of from in between the branches. And so that said, the next step I think you need to determine is how you want to grow the tomatoes. On the Heritage Farm, we grow them on trellises with hog panels. And so there's a lot more room for them to spread. We're looking for much more bulk in the crop and much, not necessarily, you know, quality or eating quality of the crop because we want it for seed. At home, I will trellis them between twine and T-posts that I tie up as they continue to grow. And some commercial growers will do what's called a single cordon even, in which the plant is trimmed to just one main growth that goes up a string that is brought down from above. And so typically, I don't think most home gardeners are going the single cordon route unless they have a lot of plants they want to maintain. So the things I think we're looking for are the first prune I look for is to keep the plant up off of the ground. That's how we're going to prevent a lot of disease with the tomato. And so the first few leaves, usually before the first flower, I take the branches off going down to the ground. As we'll get into the question about disease, that helps a lot with the watering and stuff. And mulch, of course, your tomatoes. But the next thing I look for is how many suckers I want to have. So the suckers on a tomato, if you can imagine, this finger here is your main stem, and this, my thumb, is a branch. You'll find another leaf that comes out of your elbow and will eventually become a full branch and eventually becomes an entirely new plant. The problem with that is it takes a lot of energy away from the entire plant. And so in the past, we've taken suckers out and only like I think maybe by mid-July, once the plant's almost in full growth, we'll stop and let it kind of do its thing to full fruit. And Christy, if you've got any other additions here, I'd totally accept, because it's all, there's so many different ways to do it. It's all new to me. I've been trying so many myself. But it's all about you want to restrict the growth as a home grower so that your tomatoes get more energy into individual tomatoes. And then you get just the beautiful big ones, you're easier to take care of them a little better. So I might have rambled a bit, but
No, I think that's great. And I think that a lot of market farmers type of situation will either choose two main leaders, or like you said, go down to just one. And that does really increase a lot of the airflow around the plant. Tomatoes also really enjoy consistent watering. A lot of people will put them on drip irrigation systems or do the same amount of water every day. They just do like to have really consistent soil moisture, especially during fruiting. That helps prevent some of that cat facing that you see, especially with heirloom tomatoes, where you see those like ugly, lumpy, scarry looking bottoms. That can also be a calcium deficiency, but a lot of times that is from inconsistent water. And that also is the best way, honestly, to prevent the tomato blight, which was another question that was submitted here, was what is the best way to prevent tomato blight? And that really is a huge thing, is just making sure you're not having excess plant matter on the soil and you have good airflow around the bottoms of your plants, and then pruning down your excess leaves and making sure you're focusing energy on good production of fruit. We got a lot of tomato questions, which I think we're very known for having lots of tomato varieties, so that's probably why.
I do have one more thing on the pruning that I forgot, and that is the cherry tomatoes are a different scenario as well, I've come to know. Because most of the time, you're looking for that sucker. Like I said, it'll be between your main stem and the branch. It comes up from the corner. Well, a lot of cherry tomatoes, after the fruiting branch, and so where you get your cluster of cherry tomatoes, there will be a sucker that continues on from that branch. And so those can get very wild and out of control if you're not like maintaining that. And so that's something else to look out for, I think, in the pruning department.
Great. I'm going to skip to a question about, do we have any tips for germinating corn? I thought that was a really interesting one, and we've just gone through that process here at Heritage Farm. We're growing 8 different varieties of corn this season. And one of the things that we did was we did something called chitting, basically, where you will take the seed and you can soak it, and kind of like what Justin was talking about earlier with like moist paper towels or something like that, that you can use kind of as a medium. And you can put your corn seed on that, or you can soak it like in a jar of water. And just for 24 hours, you should see that outer hull just start to get a little bit soft, and they can even get a little bit sprouty, and that's great too. And that's a really easy way to make sure that you're getting good germination before you even put them in the ground. I also love to plant corn seed very deeply, especially if you're in a drier climate where you're not getting really consistent rainfall. That's going to allow them to be in a layer of the soil where there is more water, just as a base layer in the soil. And that can be really helpful to making sure that they get through that germination process. I actually know a guy out on Hopi, a reservation, who plants his corn over a foot deep when he originally puts it in, and then he waters it really well. And it may take, several weeks for it to make it up to the surface, but it grows beautifully. And that's kind of just drawing on his indigenous knowledge from the land. So that is a really great way to make sure you get good germination, especially if you have inconsistent rainfall, is to plant them more deeply. And then I think a lot of people do put, 2 or 3 seeds maybe in each planting, and then just make sure you're keeping consistent moisture through that germination process, which is important for all seeds. If they start to sprout and then they dry out in the ground, they're going to die, unfortunately, and you won't see the results that you're looking for. Oh, I think I'll take this one about the squash vine borer. What is the best way to prevent or treat squash vine borer? We see this pest a lot in Iowa, and it is very concerning, and it will totally decimate your crops of squash. So there's a lot of different things that people do and have some success with. So if you see that you have the squash vine borer, and you should be monitoring ideally every day, looking at the plant, you will start to see this kind of gross material coming out like right at the base of the stem of the plant, and that can let you know that the borer is inside of your plant. And you can kind of do a little plant surgery on that. If you have a low population, you don't have a lot of squash going on, you can kind of slit that stem open. You can remove the squash borer. He's like a yucky little caterpillar guy. And then you can kind of close that back up and bury it into the soil. Or some people also will wrap it with foil or plastic or something like that to keep that closed up and help it to heal. But the best way to prevent it really is to successionally plant your squash throughout the growing season. So you probably will lose the first couple of squash you put in the ground, but just go ahead and replant them 3 weeks or so later. And then one of my favorite, like old-timey farm mentors told me that once you see that pale blue cornflower chicory blooming in the roadside, like on the side ditches, you'll see the chicory blooming. And I think that usually happens around the 4th of July here, but it's going to depend on where you live. Once that chicory is blooming, that squash vine borer is gone. He is already reproduced and he is no longer attacking your squash plants. So if you have the time to wait in the zone that you're in, wait until those chicories are blooming before you put your squash in the ground, and you should be able to avoid them completely.
Oh, yeah. Maybe
Um,
the fences, do you think?
oh yeah, you want to talk about fences? That'd be
Yeah,
great.
definitely. We got a question specifically. Let me find it here. I apologize. Oh yes, the best design for rabbit and deer fencing. So on campus, we rely heavily on solar-powered electrical fence lines, which are attached to T-posts with plastic insulators. Um, but at home, I think the best defense is going to be height. Deer can jump up to a 10-foot tall fence, so it can be kind of inhibitive in your own yard to get it that tall. What we also incorporate in our fence lines at Seed Savers are high lines. And so in addition to about the 4-foot high electrical fence lines, we'll have 10-foot tall poles onto which we simply tie string. And that visual barrier is often enough to keep a deer from even anticipating it could jump over the fence. It just won't bother. Um, that said, also visual barriers are probably continually the best way. If they can't see you have food on the other side, they won't engage with it. And so in the past, we've also grown bean crops up our fences on campus, and that is an additional way of preventing deer from even anticipating there's food over there to find. In my home, I have a nice 6-foot tall, wooden fence around my garden space, and that's been just impenetrable, it seems. But that said, deer are opposite of the rabbits. The rabbits are going to go under your fence, and I've only ever heard that the thing that works is a 10 to 12-inch mesh wire barrier dug into the ground around the perimeter of your fence line. I will say I don't have that in my yard at home. I would never bother. I probably have like 100-foot fence around my garden and yard, but I have had little to no rabbit pressure in my garden, and I want to say I owe that to plant trapping. You can trap a lot of pests by planting things they really like in places you want them to be. So for instance, I have on my own about 2/3 of an acre lawn, small pocket prairie we're working on. I've got a small pocket woodland. Over to my left, I have a patch of wild strawberry that we pick from, but you can never keep up with it. It's prolific. And I actually saw a rabbit nesting or digging a nest into that space, and we've still gotten all the strawberries we can eat. And so I think really investing in finding ways to incorporate, I think especially native plantings, because that's what they really love. That's what they've evolved with in there and the space they inhabit. And I think that can do really a significant amount to attract not just even deer and rabbits, but even insects that are pests in our gardens, which I think we had another question about. And we're going to talk about integrative pest management in that regard. But really, I just can't say enough for having, the nature around you help you do the work for you.
Yeah, that's definitely a huge one. We had a lot of nettles and things like that we've been taking out of our gardens, and we've been noticing in this beautiful way that they're just covered with aphids, and then the aphids are being farmed by ladybugs. So there's ladybugs, there's aphids that the ladybugs are eating, and it all kind of works together. So if you can establish those sort of natural systems that are referred to as like integrated pest management, and call in those kind of beneficial insects and things like that, it really is going to help. And that's really hard, right? The climate that we live in, where your neighbors could be spraying pesticides and things like that. You could be surrounded by farms that are spraying pesticides and herbicides and things like that. It can be really challenging, but if you can kind of gather a few people in your neighborhood or a few neighbors, or start to build those natural systems around you, where you are calling in more birds and more insects that are beneficial and can kind of balance out those harmful ones. That is really powerful, and nature is so good at dealing with all of these things that we just have only scratched the surface of being able to manage. All right. What do you guys think? Is that probably the limits of our questions, or do we have time for one more?
Let's have one more question. Two more?
Okay.
Kristen says two more. Two. Two
All
questions.
Right, two more questions. Okay, I would love to address this question from Susan Davis that says, although I have increased my pollinator habitat, the butterflies and hummingbirds seem to continue decreasing. I'm in a small town outside of Des Moines, Iowa. What is happening? And that just really ties into what I was just talking about, right? That is such a problem everywhere. And especially here in Iowa, I know a lot of you are also from the Midwest and in areas where we are seeing like such a huge increase in the land space that's being taken up by, conventional corn and soy agriculture. And those are being treated with lots of pesticides, lots of herbicides. And so there is drift that's a big problem. There's also, I just read an article the other day that said they knew back in the 70s that treating the soil one time with that anhydrous ammonia could eliminate 70 strains of microbes, or beneficial microorganisms inside of the soil. And I feel like in the 70s we didn't even have a grasp on how many microbes were actually even in the soil. To have identified 70, that would have eliminated forever. So there's a lot of things that you can do to kind of again tie back into those natural systems and increase the place where you are, and increase the habitat where you are. And that is just such a powerful step that we all can take. But it does take probably banding together with your community, with your neighbors, and yes, increasing your pollinator habitat where you are, but just understanding that is a huge part of the environment that we live in right now. So it's also going to take advocating in your larger community to make sure that you are encouraging people to reduce those uses. Be voting with your dollars, be voting wherever you can, in whatever ways that you can, to reduce the pressure of these additives and chemicals that are happening in our landscape, because it does affect everything from the soil level, the microbes, the bacteria, the insects, and then it just goes up those trophic cascades basically. So then that's affecting the birds, the pollinators, the habitat, and us, and our bodies. And so the more we can do on a local level, yes, the Xerxes Society is a great resource there. And there are a lot of others that really are working together, and you can find those people to band together with. And just know that every pocket of biodiversity that we can create is important and valuable. Here at Seed Savers Exchange on Heritage Farm, we're so blessed. We're on this almost 900-acre property, and we've seen so many amazing varieties of birds that are rare and endangered in our environment, nesting in our pastures. I think I've seen 100 different kinds of butterflies so far this spring, and lots of insects that you just don't see in other places. And so it's really amazing what can happen as you expand your ecosystem. And I wish you the best of luck, because that is such a huge challenge. What else? You see another one, Justin? Is there another question we'd like to touch on?
Well, I guess it kind of extends upon that, the question about the extreme weather and how we can prepare for that. I think I can answer that one, I think, pretty quickly. I think we're just going to have to consider more support for our plants in ways that we hadn't considered before. I know I specifically experienced, I can't remember what year it was, the derecho first really struck the east and north here. We didn't get hit by the full force of it, but we still got plenty of bad storms. And well, they blew over all of our pepper plants that year, which is something I not had to think I would really need. A storm with that force really hadn't taken over a pepper plant before. So actually nowadays I use tomato cages for peppers at home. And I think just little things like that, how can we help support our plants, considering where our water goes in our property, creating rain gardens to prevent runoff of our soil in our gardens, or flooding in certain spaces that might, create those environments that lead to tomato blotch or tomato blight. We can work together too a lot to discuss these things. I would be remiss if I didn't advocate the Master Gardeners programs across the country. Virtually every university in every state has a program. Specifically in Iowa, we have it's organized through the extension and outreach of Iowa State University, and almost every county has folks out there wanting to give you information. That's the whole point. We're there to, share that knowledge, teach each other, and learn. And so if you reach out to your local extension with questions, I can guarantee you'll find somebody who wants to engage with you and work on the problem. So, and the weather and the climate is all very distinct to our region, and so we can work together, like in the exchange, to create regionally adapted seeds going forward that are, prepared for these shorter seasons or less rain. And, as we work together, we can create food banks and seed banks even at our local libraries. I know I have a friend over here in Postville, Iowa, who's working on a seed bank for that area, which is just a beautiful thing. So, there's a lot we can do. We just got to talk to each other about it.
Christy and Justin, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your time. This was really informative, and I hope that everyone enjoyed all the insight and knowledge that they shared. Okay, you've all been doing a lot of listening. So next we're going to break out into breakout rooms, and your screen will flash, and then you'll be in a smaller group of people. And I encourage you to share your name, share where you're from, and talk about your favorite takeaway from this conversation. You can also chime in with, tell us a little bit about your own gardens too. And then, so after your breakout room, we'll gather back together. So don't hang up quite yet. Okay, we'll see you on the other side. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I was in a super fun group and got to learn about some amazing things. During this last little moment, I'm going to invite you all to kind of chime in, but first I want to make a quick announcement that I forgot to mention before. At Seed Savers Exchange this summer, we are celebrating some really exciting events that are coming up. If you haven't already registered, I encourage you to register for our conference, which will be held virtually this year. We have an incredible lineup of speakers, and as a member, you get 10% off. So you should have received an email recently with that discount code. So feel free to reach out if you can't find that or didn't get it. We're also having an in-person benefit dinner at Seed Savers Exchange that will be held on, well, first the conference is on July 20th and 21st. an in-person benefit dinner on Friday, August 4th. And then to make a super fun weekend out of it, you can stay and attend our benefit concert, which will be an outdoor music concert on Saturday, August 5th. So you can find out more information about all of these events at seedsavers.org/events. And we'll put that in the chat for you. These last few minutes, I want to open it up to you. What were some of your favorite takeaways? Raise your hand if you have something fun to share. Paul, can I pick? Oh, Kristen, go
I can
ahead.
share our group. Okay, so we had a bunch of Midwesterners in with Amy from California, and we've had such a dry summer so far here in the Midwest. So we got some sweet tips from Amy on how to navigate drought. Umbrellas for the pepper plants. Give them a break from that hot sun. That was kind of cool.
Go ahead, Paul.
So I was in with Cindy and with Barbara Carlson, I believe, is if I got the name right. And Barbara, who's from Minnesota, has spent many, many years in Alaska. She lives in Alaska, out in the boonies somewhere, I guess, is how she described it. And she's in zone 2 to 3. Unfortunately, Alaska's feeling climate change more than we are, and so she said Alaska today is like Minnesota was 40 years ago, which I thought was kind of an interesting, because even here, our climate zones have moved up a little bit over the last 20, 30 years. Anyway, she is a master, not officially, but a master gardener. She might also be a master gardener, I don't know, but was able to take very thin soil above, away from a riverbed or a lowland, and over time amended. So she's got this very, very rich soil. She's got high tunnels. She's got greenhouses. She's able to grow not just the cold weather vegetables, but she figures out how to grow peppers and tomatoes and sweet corn. The woman's amazing. I want to go visit her. Maybe we could all go. Maybe we'll do a trip, a seed saver exchange. So anyway, it was a good time, and it was a good visiting with her. And I'm not going to complain about anything in Zone 5B ever again.
Well, Paul, I think you're doing some pretty cool things in your garden as well. Paul is freshly retired. He's jumped into the deep end with gardening and is living at a new spot and has tons of space. So he's gone whole hog and planting all kinds of different raised beds and gardens that his grandchildren can come visit and enjoy. Anyone else have any highlights to share? MBN, go ahead, unmute yourself. And
if we wanted to stay in touch with the person that we were in our group with, how would we do that?
okay, thank you for that reminder. If you are open to hearing from others in this group, please put your contact information in the chat. That could be an email address, that could be a social media handle, and we can email those out to this group of registered attendees. So go ahead and put your information in the chat. You're also welcome to private message people in the group and ask for their email address if they're not interested, if they don't share it with the whole group. And you can do that. My chat is selected to meeting group chat, but then if you click on that, you can pull down and pick the name of the person that you'd like to stay in touch with. Well, all of you, thank you so much for joining us for our summer member meetup. Our next meetup is going to be in just a few weeks during our Seed Savers Exchange conference. So conference attendees will be able to join a meetup garden party. And it's the meetups are always a lot of fun. It's fun to talk to other members in our network. And I hope that all of you tonight felt like you belong because we're all gardening together. We're all trying something new together or learning. So thanks so much for being here. And thank you for your support of our nonprofit mission at Seed Savers Exchange. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next time.